Hi guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Jane and I want to welcome you to the garden. You know, there's always something that we could be doing in the garden. Every single day there are tasks, but I'm going to go through with you 5 things that I do every single day in my garden. So let's get started. So yeah guys, forever and one day I've always been having problems with pests and bugs and critters in my garden. So the first thing I do every day is I'm never going to get all of them, but I go through the garden and I look for all the little bugs that I can manually get rid of. For example, so I'm sure this little fellow was eating on something in my garden last night. So I'm going to get him. And I've seen a few others. So let me go through with you. So it's just a little statue that I have. A lady reading a book. But there's water in here, and these snails, they love water, so I can catch another little one. So yeah, they're even on my table, on my garden table. They love my garden and I don't mind them very much. They're amazing creatures. I just wish they wouldn't eat my stuff. As you can see, something has also been eating on my brassicas. So I check behind the leaves. I'm pretty sure this was also a snail's work. Look at this. Probably worth saving, so I'm gonna leave it for a while and see if I can save any of them, or at least catch the critters that have been eating on them. See, for example, here, I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, but you can see like a slime trail, so you didn't know that a snail has been eating on this cabbage. So I definitely have to be inventive, whether I put down bear traps or snail poison. We don't want to be so cruel, but definitely have to be inventive if you're going to protect your plants. That's the first thing I do every morning. I walk through and check to see if I can manually remove any pests, any snails, if there are butterfly eggs, and get rid of those. So the second thing I do every single day in the garden, unless I look at the weather channel and they are predicting a storm, I go through and I water all my plants every day in the garden. I just think they need that extra oomph, that extra help, because if it's not raining, the ground gets really dry.
Here's to the good days, here's to the sorrows. If this is a mistake, I know about tomorrow. I don't wanna fight no more, cause I don't feel the need no more, no. Just wanna make it stop.
So the third thing I do every single day in my garden, I'm either going through the weeds. So there's always some weeds to get rid of. There's nothing worse than having weeds in your garden where you can't tell the difference. Is it a plant that's coming up, or is it just weeds? So I go through every day just plucking up the weeds whenever they show up, because there are weeds every day that you should be picking up. And besides weeding, there's always something that I should be putting in the ground. So I planted the carrot seeds a few weeks ago, and I think they're ready to thin out and put in the ground. So besides weeding, like I say, there's always something to do. There's always something to keep you busy. So today, after I do my weeding, I'm going to be thinning out these carrots and putting them in the ground. So the fourth thing I do every day is I walk through my plants and I check which plants needs to be trimmed, and I get to trimming. There's always something that can be trimmed back or trimmed down, but I especially pay attention to my bonsais because I need to keep them in shape and make sure that they become the bonsais that I want them to become. So for example, this Japanese Acer, it's completely out of shape, so I'm gonna do a lot of trimming on this today. These two bonsais, I'm gonna make sure trim these today as well. I do have my bonsai cutting tools. I need to take them in and get them cleaned and sharpened. Look at that. These are actually the tools I have to use to cut on my bonsai trees and bonsai plants, but they are due for a sharpening. So the fifth thing I do is I go through the yard and I look for eggs, and I take the eggs out of the chicken coop. You never know where they will lay their eggs, so you have to keep an eye out through the yard. And we make sure clean out the coop so they're not living in their own poo, because you wouldn't want that either. And make sure feed them and make sure their water is nice and fresh. So yes, the fifth thing we do is take care of our animals. And besides harvesting our eggs, there's always something to harvest in the garden. So I go through and I harvest my peppers, I harvest my spinach, I harvest my lettuce, my tomatoes. Like right now, there are tomatoes to be plucked. Oh, let me get over here. So, there's some beautiful red tomatoes. I call them tomatoes. I'm sure they're called something else because they're so tiny. Always something to be harvested. So yes, that's the fifth thing, guys. Not only do we harvest our eggs every day and take care of our animals, but we always have something in the garden to harvest. Those are my 5 things that I do every single day in the garden. And of course, there's lots more to do in the garden, but for sure, those things I do every day. I'm happy that you could join me in the garden, and I'll see you again in my next vlog. Don't forget to connect with me in the comments. Cheers, guys.